How that woman could cook her food was like grand opera sound. Why, you could give her dining room table one look, right away you gain 7 pounds. A sick man could eat himself well pretty quick. And when he got well, he ate himself sick. And her pies, without question, would cure in dyspepsion. Ah, God, how that woman could cook.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm so glad we're all here again for another episode of Gina's Good Looking Cooking. Today we're going to be making bread. This is a recipe I found a few years ago online. I find a lot of recipes that way. I had just decided I wanted to overcome my fear of yeast, and I found this recipe. I made it. It turned out perfect. I didn't look for another one. I've made it several times since then, and it has yet to disappoint me. The ingredients you'll need to make this delicious sweet bread are the following: 2 cups milk, 2 eggs, 1/4 cup butter, 2/3 cup sugar, 2 teaspoons salt, 6 cups flour, 1 tablespoon and 2 teaspoons active yeast. Okay, to get started, we're going to need the 2 cups of milk. We need to warm this, not too hot, just bath temperature, I'd say. If you want to use a thermometer, it would be about 115 to 120 degrees. That's going to activate the yeast. We add just a little bit of the sugar to the milk. Sugar is what the yeast feeds on. And now we'll pop this in the microwave for about 1.5 minutes, and we'll check it with the thermometer. The milk's been in the microwave for about 1.5 minutes. I'm going to just check it with a quick little thermometer. Make sure we're not too hot. If it gets too hot, it will kill the yeast. If it's not hot enough, the yeast won't activate and rise as well. Looks like we're just about there. We're right at 115. That's good. So now we'll take the yeast and just pour it in here. Give it a quick little whisk and set it over to the side. It takes about 5 minutes or so. You want to see it get foamy and grow in the cup. So in the meantime, we'll get started with the rest of the bread dough. We're going to put our 1/2 stick, 4 tablespoons of butter in the mixer. We'll go ahead and add the remainder of this sugar and the salt. We'll add our 2 eggs. Just always crack in a separate bowl so you don't run the risk of contaminating the rest of your ingredients with a bad egg. And this is a really easy bread. Basically, the mixer does everything for you. It's not a stiff dough. You could do it by hand for sure, but with the mixer to do it, it's just as easy as turning it on and walking away. So we're going to get this blended up. Our yeast is proofing, and we'll be back in just a few more minutes to start this bread going. It's been about 5 minutes. As you can see, the yeast is foamy and bubbly. It smells delicious. And now it's time to get started putting this bread dough together. So we already have the butter and the sugar, the salt and the egg whipped over here together, blended well. I've switched out from the paddle to my dough hook, and now we're ready to start adding these ingredients. I'm just going to pour all this yeasty milk in the bowl. Be sure and get it all. And then we just start adding flour. I have some extra here in case we need a little bit more. As I've said before, it depends on the day and the humidity and how densely packed your measuring cup is. So we're going to start out with about half of this, so probably 3 cups. And to get it going, we'll add a little bit more. And we'll have bread dough. Okay, this is mixed in well now. We'll just go ahead and put the rest of the flour in and let the machine do all the work. I turn my mixer off when I'm adding flour. I'm one of those people that usually winds up wearing as much of my ingredients as goes into the dish. So I'd rather be safe than sorry. Now we're just going to mix this and get it all blended well together. It'll come to a ball on your dough hook. From that point, you want to give it about 6-8 minutes of kneading, and then we'll pull it out of the pan and get it started on its rise. The bread's been kneading here in the mixer for about 5 minutes. I did wind up having to add about 1/3 cup more flour. And the more you make this dough, the more you'll get to the point where you can just look at it and tell what it needs. So now we're going to turn it out and give it a couple of turns. Get it in an oiled bowl and in a warm, draft-free spot to rise. And we'll have hot, fresh bread for dinner. I'm just going to sprinkle a little flour on my surface. We don't really have to knead the bread. The machine's done all that for us. And this is such a soft dough, it really feels good. Again, it's playing with my food. I like to do that when I get the chance. So it's a little sticky in the pan, so you're just going to have to work with it to get it out on your surface. And what we're going to do today, this is actually enough to make 2 loaves. I'm going to make 1 loaf, and then I'm going to make another pan of sandwich rolls. I've got some chicken cutlets from a previous episode in the freezer. Mike called that for dinner tonight because it's so hot here. So we're going to have chicken sandwiches and probably a Netflix night. And these will be the perfect bun for that. So just turning it just a little bit, you know, getting it all shaped into a round. It just is smooth and soft. It's the perfect dough. Again, I found this recipe. I made it one time. It was perfect. I never looked any further for another one. I'm sure there are others out there, but we love this. So now you're just going to take a big bowl and some oil. I'm using canola. You just want to coat the bowl with the oil. And then we're going to take this ball of dough and just drop it in. Give it a turn. Make sure the whole thing has got a good coating on it. We don't want it to dry out. Then we'll cover it with plastic wrap. I usually just put my bread in the oven to rise. That's perfectly good spot. I don't like to preheat the oven because then I think it makes it rise too quickly and it doesn't seem to be as good a bread that way. So just giving it time to do its thing in the unheated oven. It takes about an hour. You want it to double in bulk. So I'm going to clean up from this and we'll be back in a little bit to shape our loaves. The bread's been rising in the cold oven now for a little over an hour. I've got it out. You can tell that it has easily doubled in bulk. That's what you want to look for. Another thing you can do to check it is just poke it. If your finger's impression stays in the dough, then you know it's ready. So what we're going to do is just, again, lightly flour our surface first. We're going to punch this down and then get it out of the bowl, divide it up, and start forming it into loaves and buns. So now we've got most of the air out. We'll go ahead and just give it a couple of turns. It's still a really, really soft dough, but it's not sticky at all now. It just is the typical smooth as a baby's butt. Now this is a double recipe that I've made today. I wanted to do a couple of different things with it, so I'm going to divide it up. And I'm going to make one loaf. This is a 9x5 loaf pan. That will need to bake 20 to 25 minutes. We've got all, need a little bit more off of this. A kitchen scale is a great tool to have. Just make sure everything's even. Perfect 2 pounds. Perfect 2 pounds. So this makes a lot of dough. Again, it divides easily. So if you only wanted to make one loaf or one batch of dinner rolls, it divides as easily as it multiplies. So now we're just going to roll this one piece out, tuck the ends in, get it shaped in the loaf form that we want. You want a good heavy loaf pan, straight sides. Just give it a good spray with non-stick spray. And pop the loaf in it. I take a nice sharp knife and just make one nice deep slice all the way down the center of the loaf from about 1 inch in. It just is going to help it rise beautifully. You can already see it starting to bounce back up. We're going to set this over to the side now and start forming our rolls. You know, when we decided to cut back on some of the things that weren't so good for us in our diets, of course, bread was one of the things that immediately got cut out. Well, I'm not willing to live without anything. So when I do have bread, it's important to me that it's good. And this is just a really good bread. I don't make this all the time. Maybe every couple of months I'll make a batch like this. It's just a nice treat. It makes amazing French toast. It also makes really, really good cinnamon buns if you wanted to roll it out a little thinner and then spread some cinnamon sugar and some butter, maybe some raisins and pecans. It makes an awesome cinnamon roll. There's just any number of things that you can do with this dough. It keeps well in the refrigerator. You could make them to this point, pop them in the fridge, set them out later this evening when you got back home, let them rise for just a few minutes, and then bake them off, and you've got fresh rolls or buns for dinner. Mike and I are having chicken cutlet sandwiches tonight. We decided that this has been a hot, lazy weekend, and we just wanted a light dinner. So I'm going to make these buns, and then we'll find something in the pantry that's quick and easy to go along with it and have chicken sandwiches for dinner. You could do dinner rolls for a crowd. There's just any number of things. So now I've got these all shaped. I'm going to put them on parchment paper. It just makes everything so much easier using parchment paper. You know, and they're not perfect sized, but that's okay too. It's all about just getting in the kitchen, trying new things and finding favorites and just having fun. And it tastes better. It's better for you. There's just nothing better than making something with your own hands and feeding your friends and family and seeing their faces when they try it. So now we've got 6 buns here. We've got a loaf of bread ready. They need to rise for about 30 more minutes, and then we'll be back. We'll pop them in the oven and we'll have hot bread shortly. Okay, we've been rising for another 30 minutes. I've got the oven preheated to 350. It's time to do one last thing to these delicious loaves, and then we'll have bread shortly. I've just got a little bit of extra butter melted here. I'm just going to brush the tops lightly with the melted butter. I think that gives it a nice golden color to the crust. And this is a good heavy bread. It holds up really well for slicing and sandwiches. See how pretty it rose up? That slit in the middle helped keep it nice and even. We'll brush a little butter on these buns. At any time at this point, you could slide these into the freezer and freeze them and bake them off later if you chose to. Pop them in the refrigerator and just bring them out about 30 minutes before you're ready to bake them for your evening meal. I'm going to go ahead and bake these off now because Mike and I are having our chicken cutlet sandwiches tonight. I'm going to split these buns open and toast them a little bit. I think I'm going to pull a can of pork and beans out of the pantry and stir up a little quick stovetop baked bean while the cutlets are cooking. And we've got a lazy weekend hot day dinner. Alright, I've got these all brushed with butter. They're going to go in the oven now, again at 350. Takes about 20 to 25 minutes if you're baking it in the loaf. Of course, it won't take that long with the buns, so just keep an eye on things. I'm going to set the timer for about 12 minutes, rotate everything, see how we're doing, and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, the bread's been cooking. The house smells wonderful. It's time to get it out of the oven now. The bun's baked up to a beautiful golden brown. And the loaf is just perfect. Now what I do is just one last quick little brush with some of that melted butter we started with. It just kind of runs all down the sides. It just a little extra added boost of flavor. And again, we don't eat bread every meal anymore, so I don't feel bad about when I do have it making it taste good. And just a little butter does really add to the flavor. And keep in mind, there's only 4 tablespoons in this whole recipe of dough, so it's not like it's a butter overload by any means. Okay, now get these over on the rack to cool. We're going to be back here in just a bit, and I'll turn these buns into a delicious lazy weekend dinner, and we'll probably slice into that loaf of bread and see how yummy it is. So we'll see you in just a little while. All right, the bread's cooled. We've got it over here to the side. I've got the oven preheated to 450. Chicken cutlets are on a rack on the baking sheet. We're going to go ahead and get those popped in because they only take about 15 minutes, remember. We'll set the timer for the halfway spot, so we'll flip them at that time. And then we'll get started pulling everything else together. I've got my grill pan warming up. We're going to slice these buns, and then we're going to grill them, so we'll have a nice toasted inside of this soft, delicious bread we made earlier today. And it just slices so easy. Just split it right down the middle. It doesn't tear, it doesn't crumb, it's just beautiful. It's not as sweet as a Hawaiian bread. It's just slightly sweet. It's really a delicious bread for anything. So now we've got our bread sliced. Set that back here. When we flip the chicken at the halfway point, we'll go ahead and we'll get these on the grill pan. So what do you do when you don't really want to cook? You pop chicken cutlets in the oven, and with just a few add-ins, you've got a really quick fake baked bean side dish to go with it, a bag of kettle cut chips in the pantry, and it's done. So we've got some green onion that I chopped going into the pan with a little bit of oil just to start them cooking down. And everything's done in the 15 minutes that it takes the cutlets to cook. It's always nice to have those fast go-to recipes. So we're just going to let this come up to heat and cook these onions down for just a couple of minutes. Then we're just going to dump the beans in, a splash of this and a squirt of that, and dinner's ready just that quick. Well, here's dinner tonight. I toasted 2 of the buns and cooked 2 chicken cutlets, made some no-bake baked beans, and opened a bag of kettle cut chips, and it's dinner in the blink of an eye. Thanks for coming by. I hope to see you for another episode of Gina's Good Looking Cooking.
How that woman could cook her food was like grand opera sound. Why, you could give her dining room table one look, right away you gain 7 pounds. A sick man could eat himself well pretty quick, and when he got well, he ate himself sick, and her pies without question. Put pure in dyspepsion. Ah, God, how that woman could cook.